Back to the People's Law School. As you know, we've been doing this about 20 years. We reach 2 million people in the state of Alabama. And the program is aired from here to almost Mobile. It airs sometimes in the Mobile area by people who steal the program. They pirate it and air it for free, they think. And that's okay because we like it. We encourage any airing of the program. But we reach 2 million people, and I love the program. We do it here in the city of Huntsville at the city courtroom. Compliments of Judge Rodenhauser and Mayor Battle and the council, and we really appreciate it. We bring to you, the trial lawyers do, the best lawyers in America, and I want you to know tonight is no exception. In fact, we have Judge Karen Hall, not Judge Ruth Ann Hall, her sister-in-law, but Judge Karen Hall. She is the presiding judge. Judge Karen Hall is the presiding judge of the 23rd Judicial Circuit, which is the Huntsville courtrooms, and she does a magnificent job. She's a dynamic person, and every now and then we've got a Judge Page who comes in and pinch hits for a lot of our judges, and last Friday he was overseeing a hearing called a pro-Amy hearing, where he's approving of a case where a child receives money, and he asked the defense lawyer, he said, well, how many times do you want me to sign this document? And the defense lawyer handed him a stack of pages just like this. And Judge Page looked at him just like this. You know, Judge Page is about 80 years old. And he said to the defense lawyer, he said, you know, General Douglas MacArthur ended World War II and he signed his name only twice. And he said, you want me to sign my name 5 times? He said, no, sir. He said, you go pay for your own copies. And I thought that was pretty significant. But I will tell you that the lawyer did exactly what that judge said, because the judges are an extraordinary group. In fact, one person has said that trial judges preside over the Battle of the Plain, and then appellate judges are a group, a tribe who live in the hills, who come down after the battle is over and kill all the survivors. But I will tell you, as a lawyer, here in my 40th year, I admire all the people who are courageous enough to sit there every day and face and work like they do. And I'm so proud to have Karen Hall, our presiding judge, with us tonight. She's from Jacksonville, Florida, by the way. She went to the University of Florida, was a Gator, went to the Cumberland School of Law, and while she was there, she was they do what are called mock trials, and she and her partner came in runners-up for the national award. They were number 2 in the nation for the best student mock trial lawyers. Just to let you know, that's pretty high, even though they were number 2, kind of like Auburn. Bad joke, I know. But remember, Auburn doesn't have a law school, so we always talk about Auburn. Right? Oh, yes. Thank you, Gwen. But after law school, where she did a magnificent job, and I want to, by the way, back up at the University of Florida, she was the president of the Panhellenic Council. And that will let all of you who are wherever in a sorority or fraternity know what her fellow students thought of her. That's quite an honor itself. But after law school, she went to the Court of Appeals of Alabama, where she clerked, and she met her husband, Billy Hall of Huntsville. And everybody knows Billy. He's an excellent lawyer, does a lot of divorces these days. He's about this tall. He's about 6 foot, 5'4". He's big enough. But anyway, that's her husband, and they've got 3 children. She's got 1 daughter in law school, a son in Atlanta, and she has 1 daughter that's in high school over here at Huntsville High. But they contribute a lot to our community. She was a prosecutor. Bud Kramer hired her after she got through clerking, and when they came on back up here, she and Billy, and Billy's still a lawyer, and she was appointed district judge by Fob James, am I correct? And she ran for election and won 70% of the vote, and I want you to know that nobody's ever run against her since. And she's our presiding judge, and I'm so glad to have her here tonight with us, Karen Hall, the presiding judge of the 23rd Circuit. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you all for having me, and thank you for coming out on this cold evening to listen to what I have to say. Alan has asked me for several years to come speak to you, and I don't generally like to do this type of thing. But I agreed, and then when I had to circle the parking lot 3 times to find a parking space in these freezing temperatures outside, I wondered if I'd made the right decision. But seeing all of you and how many there are here, I do appreciate you being here tonight, and I appreciate all that this program has to offer. As Alan told you, prior to the time that I came to Madison County, I worked for the Alabama Court of Civil Appeals, and realized early on that I really wanted to be in the courtroom, not at the appellate level where you primarily read, research, and write opinions and briefs. Met my husband there, and when we came back to Madison County and I began to look for a job, it was very clear to me at that time in the mid-1980s that unless you were from Huntsville, Madison County, it was very difficult for a woman lawyer to find a job. And Alan asked me today, what number lawyer, woman lawyer, or girl lawyer, as some of them say, were you here in Madison County? And I really think I know I was in the first 25, and Alan was going to count the photos on the wall. He thinks we were somewhere in the top 10, 15. And it's hard to believe that now we have so many lawyers in this community, both male and female. But I was fortunate enough to be hired by then District Attorney Bud Kramer, who took a chance on me but hired me as a grant writer for the National Children's Advocacy Center because he didn't have a job for lawyers then. And shortly after I accepted that position, I was moved into the prosecution unit of the District Attorney's Office, where I spent 9 years. I worked for Bud, I worked for Mo Brooks, I worked for Tim Morgan. I had the privilege in the early to mid-80s of being on the cutting edge of the development and establishment of National Children's Advocacy Centers all over the world. And it was a wonderful experience. For about 6 years, I prosecuted only child sexual abuse cases and violent crime type cases. Thereafter, I prosecuted mainly the last year I was in the District Attorney's Office. I had prosecuted some kidnapping and rapes of young children, but I prosecuted the last few years I was there several murders and capital murders. And in coming here tonight, I asked Alan, Alan, what do you think your students or those attending would like to hear? And he said, I think they would like to hear things that you've learned from your experiences in court, your observations in court, but through cases that you've had, perhaps, or experiences that you've had. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about 2 of the cases that I tried before I became a judge. And in the interest of time, I'll do that relatively briefly. But one of those the death occurred in December of 1993, a lady named Barbara Denise Sweeney Duncan, but her parents are named Sweeney. She was on her way home from work, traveling down in the area near Toys R Us, somewhere over in that area. She worked a late shift, and we believe it was sometime around midnight when she saw a stranded motorist whose vehicle had broken down. She stopped to assist, never realizing that that would be the last person that she would spend time with. She agreed to walk across that field there where a retirement community is. There's a dentist's office up at the front there, to go over to the gas station that's now near the new, I think, Dunkin' Donuts over in that area, where she was violently attacked, beaten. He thought she was dead, it is believed. He put her in the back of her own vehicle, drove her all over Madison County, while her children and parents wondered why she'd not come home from work. He was stopped about 12 hours later when he went in to steal beer from a convenience store. And when they went to inventory the vehicle, they found her body under some debris in the back of her own vehicle. Very difficult case to prosecute, and it was one of the first cases where I'd ever been involved with a defendant who had had such a history of drug involvement back at that particular time in the early 90s. And right on the heels of that case, in 1994, Angela Cagle was killed by Derek Mason, who was put to death in September of 2011. That was one of these, or two of three death penalty or three capital cases that I tried. The case with Derek Mason was the first jury-recommended death penalty in the North Alabama area, in the Madison County area, in over 20 years. Angela had gone to work that night. Her husband was unemployed, and she was working at a convenience store. Her husband was there with her while she worked. He left, and a man came in to rob the store. Angela had never been with another man other than her husband and was found naked in the back office area of this convenience store with only a sock on one foot with a bullet in each side of her head. It appeared that the register had that they tried to take or open the register, and it appeared that she might have been sexually assaulted. Mr. Mason did not have a significant criminal history. He was 19 years of age. Ms. Cagle was 25 years of age. During the course of that trial, if you've ever been to the Madison County courtroom, you'll know that similar to this one, there's a clock on the back of the wall. And we as lawyers and we as judges use that kind of as a dividing line for folks who will come in for a trial. This portion of the family will sit on this side of the courtroom, this will sit on the other. It's kind of an unspoken rule. In this case, as in the case with Barbara, the Glenn Medley case, families from both sides of these cases came to the courthouse, family and friends, so many that every day they had to stand outside and not literally take numbers, but wait their turn to come in so that they could hear the proceedings. At the conclusion of these trials, particularly the Mason trial, I saw the mother of Angela Cagle and the mother of Derek O'Neill Mason, embrace in front of the jury box. And it was one of the most moving experiences that I, as a lawyer, have ever experienced, to know that Miss Cagle and her family sought an eye for their daughter. And although there was great grief and pain on the part of the Mason family, they understood. And I don't know if you all followed this case, but it was a very difficult one for Judge Buddy Little, because in the days preceding Mr. Mason's death, Judge Little appealed to the governor to spare the life of Derek Mason, indicating that he wished he had not imposed the death penalty in that case. Very difficult time for family and for those of us involved in the system. But it was refreshing to a certain extent to know that people are people, and regardless of what had happened in the lives of their children, they were willing to forgive. I've been on the bench for almost 18 years. Over the course of time, I've collected some memorable mail, some songs, some letters, some pleadings, that as we go through tonight's overview of the court system, I hope to share with you. I've long said that I'd like to write a book called The Judges of Madison County. I have not, because I don't know if sharing this information is insensitive or not. So you are my captive audience tonight, and you can let me know when we conclude. First of all, I briefly want to make sure that you understand the court system in the state of Alabama. And although this book is somewhat dated and hasn't been published in quite some time, we can get copies for you to distribute from the Administrative Office of Courts, A Guide to Alabama Court Procedures. And it was written and disseminated the first time that Chief Justice Moore was in office. But the overview of the system is excellent, and it's very relevant to today as well. There are 9 justices, including the Chief Justice, on the Alabama Supreme Court. There are 5 elected judges on the Alabama Court of Civil Appeals. They're elected statewide, and 5 elected judges on the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals. And these are partisan races. All judicial races in this state are still partisan, unfortunately. There are many who believe, and I'm one of those, that these races should be nonpartisan. Below those 2 intermediate, if you will, appellate courts, and below the highest court are the circuit courts of the state of Alabama. Those are the trial courts, and I am one of the circuit judges in this state. There are 40 circuits. As of last week, there were 146 circuit judges in the state. We're courts of general jurisdiction, and the 3 courts whose cases can be appealed to these trial courts are the probate courts. There are 68 probate courts in the state. The district courts, there are 106 elected district judges in this state. And then the municipal courts, and we are standing in one such court. There are 257 appointed judges at this time to the municipal courts of the state of Alabama. So I wanted you to have that overview of our system as we go forward. I was a district judge for 9 years before I became a circuit judge. And as it relates to the court system and the jurisdiction of the court system, in the district courts you hear criminal cases, you hear traffic cases, preliminary hearings wherein someone has been charged with a felony and they have the right to basically understand what the charges are against them, and a court to determine if there's enough evidence for the case to go to the next level, if you will. And those are in all felony cases all the way through capital cases, misdemeanor trials, initial appearances for all inmates, 72-hour hearings, of course. There are civil disputes up to $10,000, small claims matters that used to be up to $1,500. When I left the district court, they were up to $3,000. Evictions and all types of juvenile proceedings, delinquency and dependency, juvenile mental commitments. And in just a moment, I'm going to share with you something that I was unfamiliar with when I took the district court bench, and that was petition for unemancipated minor requesting a waiver of parental consent for abortion. In traffic court, I think most of you are aware of what happens in traffic court. I don't know how many of you have ever gotten a speeding ticket. I hope not that many, but it is not uncommon for those to be stopped for all kinds of things. I think the most interesting citation that ever came through my court was excessive horn blowing at a funeral. And that case was continued several times before it was finally tried, and it was a most interesting case. The trooper, unfortunately, some soon came to realize had some other issues, and he lost his job shortly after this case was tried based on other activities he was involved in, but he also gave his mother a ticket once. So you can know there is truth in law enforcement as it relates to those particular activities. One of my favorite traffic trials was a case wherein in district court there is no jury to serve as the buffer between the court and the litigants. It's you listening to the law enforcement officer saying this citizen violated the law, and the citizen saying I did or I did not violate the law. And this one particular citizen acknowledged that she was driving 65 miles an hour in a 55-mile zone, and she continued to testify for probably 15 minutes, acknowledging guilt. And finally, upon cross-examination by the prosecutor, she said, well, everyone knows that you get an allowance of 10 miles over the speed limit. Well, I'm here to tell you that's not true. I will tell you that some troopers will allow you up to 5 to 7, maybe 10 miles over the speed limit, but the rumors that you get up to 10 miles over the speed limit are in fact not true. Preliminary hearings are extremely interesting. It's an opportunity for those who are charged with felony offenses to make inquiry, if you will, to find out and for the court to determine whether or not the case should move forward to the grand jury. And we have one young lady here tonight who recently served on the Madison County grand jury. She stopped me in the back and said if we could pay her a little bit more than what she was paid, she'd love to do it every day. Unfortunately, it's randomly selected. Generally every other month is when the grand juries are impaneled. But I had the experience of meeting Jeffrey Franklin at his arrest and at his preliminary hearing, the young Grissom student who executed his parents, siblings, and left one in a very bad way. I also, and judges at that time, will appoint attorneys for those in need of counsel. I called upon the first attorney who said, I cannot do that kind of work. And the second attorney I called was Mr. Roy Wesley Miller, who said, let me think about it. Roy and his wife, Beth, I found out later, went to see their clergyman, their pastor, prayed, thought about it. He came back several hours later and told me he would accept the appointment, but he wanted a drug screen on his client immediately. It was the drug screen on Jeffrey Franklin that Mr. Miller asked for that assisted Mr. Franklin in his defense and in receiving the plea bargain that the state offered as a result of the substances that were found in his blood and in his system, that if we had waited, or if anyone had waited another 24 to 48 hours, probably would not have been there. Mr. Miller is still practicing. Mr. Miller also represented Amy Bishop a few years ago and does an outstanding job in this community. 72 hours and initial appearances, I really don't know what to say about those except you meet some very interesting folks who've been locked up and can't make bond. Some who will unzip their pants right in front of you and use the restroom on the floor. Some who will sit at the table when filling out their paperwork and take the pen that the state has provided and jam it in their ear. All of these things occurred in my presence without staff, and I've quickly learned that not only did I have to be a judge, but a mental health therapist, and on one occasion I was a very weak nurse while trying to assist with those particular endeavors. But it's at that point in time that individuals are provided with counsel and that many are released on bond. In your civil and small claims cases, if you've never been to the courthouse and you are very interested in shows like Judge Judy or Judge Joe Brown, you should come on a day when there's a small claims docket being called. Never a dull moment. I think my favorite case was the lady who wore about my size and contended that the dry cleaners had shrunk her pantsuit. And let me back up, the pantsuit was about my size. But the way you sit on the bench, sometimes you can't see the litigants who are standing in front of you. So she pulled out the pantsuit and I looked at it, and it did appear to be the size that she indicated that it was, and that she swore up and down that the dry cleaners had shrunk her pantsuit. Well, when I walked around to see her, it appeared that she'd gained about 20 pounds, and I concluded that that was the reason her pantsuit wouldn't fit. In small claims court, where claims can be up to $3,000, most folks are not represented by attorneys, and there are special rules that dictate in small claims court. This is a complaint, an actual complaint that was received in small claims court, and when I say you see it all, you see it all. She made a claim for $285.95 because he, the defendant, signed a promissory note saying he would pay me $238 by June for my abortion. He never paid any portion of that. The other $47.95 is the aftercare costs, including pain medication and prevention products and undergarment protection for me bleeding. These are the kinds of cases you might also see in small claims courts, an actual pleading. Had another case in civil wherein claims are up to $10,000, where a young man came in and kept referring to the defendant as she. He had dug a ditch for her, and she had not paid him. When she had an opportunity to speak, she said, "Do I have to call him he?" And I said, "No, ma'am." And she said, "Well, he is my son, and he graduated from college, and he moved back in, and he's not paying any of the bills, and he should dig that ditch for free." So, evictions also occur in the district court. Once I had a case wherein abandoned horses were left on the property. Things you don't ever think about, abandoned livestock, abandoned horses. It took me 2 full days to figure out what I was going to do with the horses because no one wanted the horses. Sheriff's Department wanted me to just let them run down the street and hope that someone would come get them. But ultimately, the Sheriff's Department had to find a place for the horses, and we did. And you know, in my day growing up, anyone would want a free horse, but not in that particular day and time. I had a very difficult time giving those horses away. District court is also the juvenile court throughout the state. In most places, the district courts are your juvenile court. They are here as well. That's where all of your dependency and delinquency cases are filed. Very difficult. Can't really say much about them other than they are very painstaking. I had a case once with a beautiful woman and just a lovely child, no father involved. In this particular case, the department had finally picked the child up because of things that were occurring at school and the child being so tired. Department of Human Resources went into the home and it was immaculate. Brand new little Barbie bed, brand new Barbie car, everything you could desire for your child, brand new clothes, closet full of everything you could want and want for. But the department soon realized that there were tags on the clothes, that the bed had never been slept in, that the bikes and Barbie cars had never been ridden. And when they finally got the mother to open the door, what they found was a stack this high of washed and cleaned wrappers from fast food restaurants wherein hamburgers and chicken sandwiches had been unwrapped. She'd washed the papers and stacked them, along with all of the utensils and the straws. That mother would from time to time appear at the elevator in the courthouse and beg for the opportunity to see her child. Very difficult, very painstaking. And it's my understanding that after I left the district court, her parental rights were terminated and that she moved. Juvenile mental commitments also occur in the district court. I once had an 8-year-old here at a local elementary school stab another 8-year-old in the neck with a fork in the lunchroom. It took us almost a week to find someone who would provide care for this 8-year-old child, and his parents had resources. Very, very difficult at that age. First time I ever came face to face with this particular law, this waiver of consent law, was about 6 months into my term as a district court judge. Never heard of it before. But I did find after my first 72-hour hearing, I told you about that, that's where they bring the inmates in. There'd not been a judge on the bench that I took for about 3 months. So they brought in, I think it was over 27 inmates for me to conduct hearings on. And I will tell you that as I walked out of my chambers, it was the first judicial activity for me, the first set of hearings I ever conducted. I took a deep breath and thought, and I wanted this job. None of those people had bathed in weeks. So I went to the law books and I found a statute that's still on the book wherein the courts can require prisoners to bathe. This particular statute, again, I was at my desk when this petition crossed my desk, and in essence, what we call it at the courthouse is a waiver of consent for abortion. And it states that a petitioner under the age of 18 years and unemancipated may petition the juvenile court, and there are certain requirements that must be found, primarily that the petitioner is pregnant, that the petitioner wishes to have an abortion without the consent of either parent or legal guardian, and there must be one or both of the following allegations: that the petitioner is sufficiently mature and well enough informed to intelligently decide whether to have an abortion without the consent of either of her parents or legal guardian, that one or both of her parents or her guardian has engaged in a pattern of abuse, sexual, physical, or emotional against her, and that the consent of her parents, parent, or legal guardian otherwise is not in her best interests. This is still good law. These petitions still come in. There's a right of appeal. The court must make a determination within 72 hours, the juvenile court, as to whether or not they're going to grant the petition. Then an appeal must be taken because time is of the essence, and these cases are to take priority over all other cases. There's a 5-day right of appeal in that particular instance, and the Supreme Court is urged to immediately rule upon the petition. So just something that as a citizen I think you need to be aware of, that is one of the laws on our book. I want to commend my retired colleagues, Judge Lutz, Judge Fay, Judge Moquin, Judge Hamilton, and Judge Sherrod, who are all retired district court judges. Judge Fay and Judge Hamilton went on to be circuit court judges. But because of them, we have the CAJA program, the Court-Appointed Juvenile Advocate Program, the Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council. small claims mediation programs that are excellent. I don't know if any of you are small claims mediators, but I would encourage you to get involved in any of these. And Judge Lynn Sherrod started our drug court programs here in Madison County that have grown so that we now have an adult drug court, a family drug court, a juvenile drug court. We also have mental health courts, veterans courts, all kinds of alternative courts. And the first one was started by Judge Sherrod. I took the circuit court bench in 2005, and before I do, I wanted to share with you my favorite of all time letter from one of my juveniles. He did not like me very much, and he wrote me a list of 100 ways to commit suicide. Loss of blood, AIDS, cancer, gunshot, heroin overdose, heart attack, ink poisoning, the flu, total body failure, blood clot, get eaten by lions, get eaten by piranhas, poison gas, and number 88 was stare at Judge Karen Hall. So, again, never a dull moment in my life. In the circuit court, I basically handle 3 types of cases: criminal, civil, and family. Criminal all the way from traffic appeals to death penalty cases. I had prosecuted death penalty cases, and I thought I had an opinion of death penalty cases until I was on the other side of the bench. And I had the opportunity to try State of Alabama in the death of Officer Daniel Golden versus Benito Albaron. I can say very little about that case because it is still on appeal. But I will tell you, when you are faced with having to impose the death penalty, you really have to give great thought to what that means. And you have to give great thought as a juror, as a citizen, as a lawyer, as a jurist, to all of the implications of the death penalty and all of those that are affected thereby. I will tell you that imposing a sentence of death on someone who speaks no English through an interpreter was probably one of the most difficult things I've had to do in my 18 years on the bench. I've seen pimps and prostitutes in the circuit court. I can tell you that our prostitutes in this area of the country do not look like Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman. Several have stabbed their clients for less than $5. I have learned in the murder trials that I've tried recently, one was mistried, then tried again and mistried. Then when it was set for trial the 3rd time, the defendant pled guilty. I've learned that some lawyers study the law and some lawyers are better orators than others. But through that case, I was enlightened to know that when all of the club's regular hours end, we have a lot of clubs here in Madison County in the woods and near railroad tracks. It was a very interesting case for me. People will kill you over your cell phone, over your shoes, or over looking at their girl the wrong way. And I do agree with what the mayor said just a short while ago. Most of our homicides in recent years have been drug-related. I think the worst I saw recently was people who were bound, gagged, their home destroyed, sofas ripped to shreds, looking for the money that these young men were supposed to have had in that home. Some of the worst photographs I've ever seen. Some of the worst evidence that I ever saw. The defendant never took the stand. Nothing was ever discussed in that trial. As he was led from the courtroom, his little boy said, "I'll miss you, Daddy." And he looked at some of the men who were there, I guess with him or his family, and said, "Keep your promise to my family." In civil cases, again, from minor traffic accidents where there's only property damage to medical malpractice cases. I tried the rock quarry case out in the town of Gurley. I've tried high-tech disputes. Within the past couple of years, I tried one between 2 major corporate entities and giants in this community and one in the world. There was a $7.5 million verdict in that case. And I really believe that the evidence turned when the younger generation in their electronic communication through email, said to another young technician, "Ha ha ha, I'm ROTFLS," at the client, who was an older man. And when asked in front of the jury what ROTFLS was, he said, "rolling on the floor, laughing, snorting." One of our retired judges' wives was on that jury. She knew all of the lawyers involved in the case. And one of the lawyers said, "I knew it was over when Maggie Little looked at me and went, $7.5 million. I recently had a case where I had to decide if sod was a crop and what one's rights were to harvest implements. Can't talk too much about that because I believe it's going up on appeal also. I've had individuals complain that electronic devices have been planted in their teeth and in their eyes. I had one gentleman indicate that he had reception in his glass eyeball and he could watch cable TV through his glass eye. Recently, I received some pleadings. And these are, in fact, pleadings wherein a local citizen claims that he is entitled to $300,000 in damages from a local drugstore and other local drugstores because he can feel the altered reactions in his brain and body when he touched the packages or containers and boxes and the sacks of food in the store. They have unauthorized, illegal controlled chemical substances that cause his body and brain to be illegally affected, that he is a naturally born heterosexual male who is being subjected to bisexual male hormone chemical substances and other different chemicals causing him to hurt in his lower back, his teeth, and his molars. These are kinds of cases that we have. And they are, in fact, legitimate cases that have to be set for trial. All right. Let me also state that I hear family law cases, very difficult for all involved. What I've learned from these and many other cases is that people just want to be heard. I tried a divorce case one time for 4 days. I'm a relatively patient person, and I realized if I let these folks get it all out that they would probably resolve it on their own, and they did, with the exception of one item, and it was an Olin Mills photograph that hung over the fireplace. Not a portrait, but a photograph that could be duplicated for $245. And when some of the lawyers agreed to help pay for the $245 reprint, then they started fighting over the frame that the picture was in. Protection from abuse cases are also heard in the circuit court. Those are when someone believes they're, in my opinion, at risk of serious bodily injury or death. I think protection from abuse petitions are being abused, and we're trying to make certain that they're not being overused to gain leverage in a domestic relations case. But generally it's when folks, what we see most of the time is when folks are just fighting. But there are some very serious cases where people have been shot, maimed, injured, or threatened, and the protection order is entered. My most interesting PFA and domestic relations case was over a litter of pit bull puppies. So they were fighting over who was going to get the pit bull puppies. And I must share this with you. This one domestic relations case went on and on and on. And the man had written a letter to his wife before he married her with a whole series of reasons why he loved her before he married her. And they were in numerical order. And he was reading them aloud in court, had never shared them with her before. And when he got to the bottom of the page, I believe it was about number 24, he said, "Because she has ample breasts." She didn't think it was funny. he thought it was serious. The case was over. They got a divorce and moved on. So I do want to say, in the interest of time, that I think what is happening in our court system today is that jurors involved in this process want more than they used to want. Many times in the circuit court, in jury trials, we are hearing citizens say, I believe he did it, or I believe they were liable, but I needed more evidence. I believe he committed the crime, but I don't know if I'm convinced beyond a reasonable doubt. I also have come to learn, as I should know, and we all should know, that everyone just wants to be heard, and that one of the most important things that we can do is to listen. There are a couple of things in the court system that really need to be taken into consideration and reevaluated, and that is the way that not only the litigants but the lawyers dress when they come to court. We have people who come to court in what one referred to as hot shorts, or in my day were called hot pants. A lawyer once appeared in my court, but not for long, with a pair of flip-flops. And we often see folks come to court in T-shirts with marijuana leaves, or if you can't run with the big dogs, step off the porch kind of clothing. So if you ever come to court, and I know you will, or if you know someone coming to court, please tell them that they don't have to respect the judge. As I tell them, you don't even have to like me, but you have to respect this system and this process. We also need to reevaluate the way we provide indigent services. A lot of folks are coming into my court with very, very expensive and genuine and authentic handbags, clothing, and shoes, and are receiving indigent assistance, or assistance for which they have to pay little or no monies. Lastly, I'd like to share with you what is the crisis, if you will, facing the court system, and that is lack of funding. The Chief Justice at our conference last week shared with us where we find ourselves now with the state courts. And I think part of the problem that we are experiencing as a court system is that although the judicial branch is a separate yet equal branch of government, one of the three branches of government, the legislative and executive branches of government have started referring to the courts as agencies. They aren't referring to us as a branch any longer. We are an agency of state government. So they are addressing us and our needs as an agency. For FY 2014, there is a projected shortfall for the courts of $33 million. $33 million, less than we were appropriated in 2002. The courts collect monies for the State General Fund. In fiscal year 2013, the courts collected $515 million and some odd dollars, okay? $70 million of that went into the State General Fund, $14.5 million went to victims of crime, $133 million went to businesses and individuals, $91.5 million went to the executive branches, and $170.5 million was collected for child support. What we're seeing here, our funding in the judicial branch has decreased by over 21% since fiscal year 2002 in the judicial branch. And what's happening is this: when you're fined or assessed a fee in court, your money does not go into, or your fines, fees, or costs do not go into an account for the courts. That would be unconstitutional, in my opinion, and unconscionable. I couldn't say, you look like you could pay $50, you look like you could pay $100, Alan, you look like you could pay $20,000. You know, that. So all of the monies associated with court go into the State General Fund. And when this branch was created, all of the funding that was supposed to be needed for the courts was to come from the General Fund. Now what is happening is we are being referenced as an agency, and they are trying to treat the court system as they do other state agencies and provide budgets. The court system has lost and is down over 300 employees in the past 6 years. So we are trying very hard to work with our legislators and the executive branch about the realization that the court system, the judicial system, the judicial branch is a separate but equal branch of government. And that's the way we need to be viewed. And we really need your help because it has come to the point where many of us over the years, many judges over the years, have actually, we really thought it would never come to this, but we're to the point of having to consider hiring a lobbyist to assist the court system so that we know what types of bills are being introduced that affect the courts. For instance, the bond forfeiture bill last year that was passed. You know, some of that money goes to the district attorney's office, some of it goes to the clerk's office. None of it goes to the court system, but the court is required to have staff to do the work, okay? Many other bills are pending wherein all of those funds would go to other agencies, but not to assist the courts. It used to be, in the old days, if you will, that the legislative delegation would pick up the phone and call the judge and say, hey, in their community, a bill has been introduced that affects our local court system. What do you think about that? Now what's happening is the judges are trying to find the bills to call our legislators to say, hey, a bill has been introduced in another part of the state that would affect us in this and such way. So we need your assistance. We need the assistance of any citizen who's interested in this topic in helping us have a better working relationship with our legislative delegation and the executive branch so that there can be separate but equal branches of government. So I think it's time for questions. Yes, sir.
A couple of items. First off, you asked for the assistance. What kind of assistance specifically are you talking about?
Okay.
And earlier you also mentioned the advocacy programs and how do people become or
involved?
enter the advocacy
Okay.
program?
As it relates to the advocacy programs, we have a court administrator. Her name is Kim Gray. She's on the 3rd floor of the Madison County Courthouse. Her number is 256-532-3575, and she can assist you with all of that information. All of those programs are very worthwhile. As it relates to assistance with our delegation, what we would like for you to do to assist us is just, if you know a member of our legislative delegation, just to say to them, if any bills are introduced that affect the courts, and the courts include the clerk, the district attorney's office, the probate judges, fines and fees, all of those types of things. If any bill is introduced or you come across a bill, would you please talk to one of our local judges before you act on that bill? And what we're finding is that many others involved in the judicial system have hired lobbyists and have the time to go to Montgomery and are there frequently. And frankly, I can either stop trying cases, stop doing my work, and read the bills that the Administrative Office of Courts is trying to send to me every day, or I hope that it goes back to the way it used to be. I can remember Representative Albert Hall calling me, Representative Howard Sandifer calling me 10, 15 years ago saying, hey, a bill has been dropped out of Etowah County's delegation that would do this and such in the courts. What do you think about that? And all we ask is that somehow before they act and these bills are passed, that we know about them. Yes, ma'am.
How does this affect the waiting time before you get your day in court?
Okay.
You having fewer employees.
It is extremely difficult. We're very lucky here in this circuit because we have 2 retired judges who work full-time for nothing other than their retirement salary. We say they love us. They say they just want to get out of the house. But they have small offices in the courthouse, and they come and they assist us regularly, daily. They're there. We are lucky in Madison County in the sense that our citizenry is not lucky because our court costs are the highest in the state. But our court costs were increased, which allowed us to continue to employ 18 additional employees in the clerk's offices and the judicial offices to keep us going. So the way my office runs, and I think most circuit judges' offices run, are, and we've gotten in a system, 6 months from date of indictment, your case will go on a trial docket. 4 to 7 months from the time a complaint in a domestic relations case is filed, your case will go on a docket. What we're finding there is the attorneys and the parties are saying, wait, we're not ready. We're not ready. We haven't had time to prepare our case. And in civil cases, it just depends. Non-jury cases are set generally within 3 months after the answer is filed. But today is a jury week for us this week. Today I had a case that was filed in 2011, but the incident occurred in 2009. Now they'd asked for several continuances, and once I finally got them there today, they settled it. And that's part of what we have to do sometimes, is being creative, because the defendant in the case, the only party that was left was the insurance carrier who had the underinsured motorist coverage, and they did not want to pay out because the plaintiff had recovered from the tortfeasor, the driver in the automobile accident. So I said, why don't we, after about an hour of talking, I said, why don't we try to be creative? Instead of you writing her a check because you believe she's received too much money already from the tortfeasor, why don't you pay for her surgery that she's supposed to have on her leg and provide, and her lawyer said, and provide a few meals, to which they said no. And I said, well, maybe provide some flowers or the cost of your hotel room for driving up here as an attorney from Birmingham. So, you know, you have to think outside the box as well. Anything else? Any other questions? Yes, sir.
This may not be the subject of tonight, but the recent Department of Justice report on Tutwiler Prison, what do you make of that? Is it fair? Or?
Let me say this. One of the best things that Chief Justice Cobb, Sue Bell Cobb, did for the judiciary was several years ago in September, she required us to report to Montgomery. We were placed on buses, and we each had an opportunity to visit 2 prisons. One of the prisons I visited was our only women's prison in the state of Alabama, Julia Tutwiler Prison for Women. I've never seen anything like it. You can work in the only area that had air conditioning was where they were, the sewing machines were, the shop where they were making prison uniforms. I believe they started at 8 to 10 cents an hour, and those who'd been there the longest made less than 50 cents an hour. But everyone wanted that job so that they could get in the air conditioning. Many of you know of Betty Wilson, who was convicted of murdering her husband here in this community. Unbeknownst to me until I arrived there, she was in the medical unit. She had attempted to commit suicide and had several times previously, because that is one of the only other air-conditioned places in that prison. Those who were alleged to have been mentally ill or impaired, in my opinion, were severely medicated in their particular area of the prison. It was very crowded. It was very hot. There were male guards watching female prisoners bathe. There were female guards watching male prisoners bathe at the male prison that I went to. I found it very distressing at both of those prisons that there was virtually nothing for them to do. You know, we all think about way back when, where there were workshops and they were making car tags and they could be on roadside crews and things of that nature. There's really very little of that going on any longer. At the men's prison, one of the only air-conditioned places which they had the judges gather was in their place of worship. And on Monday night they're Baptist, and on Tuesday night they're Methodist, and on Wednesday night they're Catholic, and on Thursday night they're Episcopalian, and on Friday night they're this, and Saturday night they're that, and Sunday night they're this, so that they can be in air conditioning. That was very interesting to me. So I have not thoroughly reviewed that study. I believe it came out last week, and I was in Montgomery at the judicial conference. But if it says that reform is necessary, I think serious consideration needs to be given to that. I do believe at some point in time in this state, we're also going to have to consider legalization of certain classifications of drugs. Whether we do it or not, I think it will be considered. Most of our prison population are folks that are there for possession of marijuana and or cocaine, crack cocaine. You can be convicted of, if you have one marijuana cigarette and you're convicted 3 times with one marijuana cigarette, your minimum sentence is 15 years to 99 years or life on your 4th conviction. Our drug-related cases, what some refer to, and I'm not saying this is my opinion, I'm just telling you what's being discussed at my level, our minor drug-related cases are filling our prisons. And there's a lot of discussion about community-based or treatment-based alternatives in those types of cases. Very expensive. And I also think we are trying to fund our criminal justice system on the backs of those people. It's a $1,000 fine. You get caught with one marijuana cigarette, $1,000 fine, $1,000 to the State Fund for Victims of Crime, $500 to the Crime Victims Fund. It's just unbelievable the amount of money that you're asking people who are declared indigent and receiving court-appointed counsel to pay as it relates to fines and fees, generally over $3,500, most of the time around $5,000 to $6,000. So, anything else?
Thank you, Judge Hall.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.